And that, class, concludes our theoretical overview of Class 3 predators. Professor Zixnax announced, his tentacles waving with what passed for excitement in his species. Any questions before we move on to the practical demonstration? The lecture hall fell silent, a mix of anticipation and dread palpable among the gathered alien students. Was silent except for the distinctive sound of someone slurping the last dregs of a truly massive coffee. All eyes and various sensory organs turned to the source of the noise. Seated in the back row, feet propped up on the desk in front of her, was the lone human in the class, Sarah Johnson, exchange student extraordinaire and talking biological hazard according to half the faculty. She lowered her deadliest catch mug, oh the irony, and offered a sheepish grin. Sorry, Prof. Didn't mean to interrupt your dramatic pause. Please do continue with whatever horror show you've got planned for us today. Professor Zixnax's eye stalks twitched in irritation. Miss Johnson, I assure you this is no horror show. It is a carefully controlled demonstration of, yeah, Sarah waved dismissively, carefully controlled danger. I've heard that one before. Remember the incident with the supposedly docile carnivorous plants last month? A collective shudder ran through the class. Several students instinctively checked their appendages, as if making sure everything was still attached. That was an unfortunate mishap, the professor conceded. But I assure you today's subject is fully sedated and secured, Sarah snorted. And I'm the Queen of England. You most certainly are not, squeaked Blixtorp, a gelatinous blob of a student. Earth's monarchical system is a hereditary. It's called sarcasm. Blix, Sarah sighed. We'll work on it. Professor Zixnax cleared his throat, or whatever passed for a throat in his bizarre alien anatomy. If we're quite finished with the commentary, I'll proceed with bringing in our subject. They pressed a button on his hover podium, and a large container was wheeled into the room by two very nervous-looking lab assistants. The container was made of transparent material, allowing the class to see the creature inside. It was underwhelming, to say the least. Behold, the professor announced with entirely too much gravitas, a primed specimen of Felis catus domesticus. Sarah blinked. You've got to be kidding me. Inside the container, looking thoroughly annoyed at having its nap disturbed, was an ordinary housecat, orange tabby to be precise. It yawned, showing off an impressive set of teeth that sent half the class cowering behind their desks. This, students, is one of the most efficient predators in the known galaxy, Professor Zixnax continued, oblivious to Sarah's growing smirk. Observe its razor-sharp claws, its powerful jaws, its keen senses. Its cute little toe beans, Sarah added helpfully. The professor shot her a withering look. Miss Johnson, please. This is a serious scientific demonstration. Oh, I'm being dead serious, Prof. Those toe beans are lethal. One touch and you'll die of cuteness overload. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the class, quickly silenced by a glare from the professor. Now, as I was saying, he continued, this creature is capable of taking down prey many times its size. Its hunting instincts are unparalleled, and the cat chose that moment to start grooming itself, paying absolutely no attention to the terrified aliens surrounding it. Truly terrifying, Sarah deadpanned. I'm shaking in my boots. Professor Zixnax's color changed to a deeper shade of purple, a sign of frustration in his species. Perhaps a practical demonstration will illustrate my point more effectively. I will now attempt to handle the creature, showing you the proper technique for. Hoa woo, hoa. Sarah sat up straight, suddenly alert. You're going to do what now? Handle the creature, the professor repeated slowly, as if explaining to a particularly dim child. I assure you, I am fully qualified and have studied Earth fauna extensively. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Oha. And how much of that studying involved actually touching a cat? The professor's silence was answer enough. Yeah, that's what I thought, Sarah sighed, standing up. Look, Prof, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but maybe we should leave the cat wrangling to someone with, actual experience. Are you implying that you're more qualified than I am, Ms. Johnson? The professor's tone could have frozen nitrogen. Sarah shrugged. Well, I did grow up with 3 cats, worked at an animal shelter for 2 summers, and I'm not, terrified of my own shadow. So yeah, I'd say I'm a bit more qualified in this particular area. The class watched this exchange like a tennis match, heads swiveling back and forth between the increasingly flustered professor and the maddeningly calm human. This is preposterous. Professor Zixnack sputtered. I will not have my authority undermined by AA. Well, what? Sarah's voice took on a dangerous edge. A human? A Deathworlder? Go on, say it. We all know that's what you're thinking. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Even the cat seemed to sense it, pausing mid-lick to observe the drama unfolding. Very well, the professor said after a long moment. If you're so confident in your abilities, Ms. Johnson, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate for the class. Sarah grinned, a predatory gleam in her eye that made several students inch away from her. Thought you'd never ask, Prof. She sauntered down to the front of the lecture hall, cracking her knuckles dramatically. The class held its collective breath as she approached the container. Now, students, Sarah began, adopting a mockery of the professor's lecturing tone, the first rule of handling a Felis catus domesticus, or as we primitive humans call it, a kitty cat, is to remember one crucial fact. She paused for dramatic effect, her hand hovering over the container's release mechanism. And what fact is that, Miss Johnson? Professor Zixnax asked, unable to hide his curiosity. Sarah's grin widened. They can smell fear. With that, she hit the release button. The top of the container slid open and chaos erupted. The cat, apparently deciding it had had quite enough of being a scientific specimen, leaped from its confinement with a yowl that sent half the class diving for cover. Professor Zixnax let out a most undignified shriek and attempted to climb his hover podium. Sarah, meanwhile, stood her ground. Here, kitty, kitty, she cooed, holding out her hand. The cat, in the way of cats everywhere, immediately lost all interest in freedom and instead trotted over to investigate this new person. It sniffed Sarah's outstretched fingers, then butted its head against her hand, demanding pets. Oh, you're just a big softy, aren't you? Sarah laughed, scratching behind the cat's ears. It responded with a purr that sounded like a small engine revving up. The class watched in stunned silence as Sarah scooped up the deadly predator and cradled it in her arms like a baby. The cat, for its part, seemed perfectly content with this arrangement. Right, Sarah addressed the class, her voice dripping with sarcasm. As you can see, I am now locked in mortal combat with one of the galaxy's most fearsome beasts. One wrong move and oh no, it's attacking. The cat had started kneading Sarah's arm, purring even louder. The horror, Sarah deadpanned. I may not survive this encounter. Tell my story, brave exonobiology students. Tell them how I fell in battle against the mighty, what's this little guy's name anyway? All eyes turned to Professor Zixnax, who was still clinging to his hover podium like a lifeline. He cleared his throat, attempting to regain some semblance of dignity. The specimen is designated Feek 1138, he said stiffly. Sarah rolled her eyes. Oh, for we're calling him Fluffy. Feek 1138, honestly. No wonder he was grumpy. She turned her attention back to the cat, Fluffy, who was now attempting to groom her hair. Who's a good little apex predator. You are. Yes, you are. The absurdity of the situation finally broke through the class's shock. Nervous giggles turned into full-blown laughter as they watched their terrifying human classmate baby talk a creature they'd been taught to fear. Now, Sarah said, addressing the class again, who wants to learn how to actually handle a cat? Tentatively, a few brave souls raised their hands or equivalent appendages. Excellent. Step right up, don't be shy. Fluffy here promises not to eat anyone, right, Fluffster? The cat mewed in response, which sent another wave of nervous laughter through the room. Over the next hour, Sarah guided her fellow students through the basics of cat handling. There were a few close calls. Apparently, Zygoblaxians taste delicious to cats, who knew, but by the end, even the most timid students had managed to pet Fluffy without fainting. As the class wound down, Sarah found herself surrounded by a group of awestruck aliens, all clamoring to ask questions. How did you know it wouldn't attack? Blixtorp asked, his gelatinous form quivering with excitement. Sarah shrugged. I didn't, not for sure. But cats are generally pretty chill if you don't freak them out. Plus, this little guy's obviously used to people. Aren't you, Fluffles? Fluffy, now sprawled across Sarah's lap, offered a lazy mrip in response. But the claws. Another student, a methane breather named Grix, exclaimed. And those teeth. Surely they're designed for rending flesh. Well, yes, Sarah admitted. Cats are predators. They hunt, they kill things. But they're also domesticated. Humans have been living with them for thousands of years. They're not out to get us. Fascinating, Blixtorp burbled, and you say humans keep these creatures in their dwellings, voluntarily. Sarah nodded. Yep, they're pets, companions. Some people treat them like family. This revelation sent a wave of excited murmuring through the group. The idea of willingly cohabitating with a predator was mind-boggling to most of them. But why? Grix asked, his breathing apparatus hissing with curiosity. What purpose do they serve? As Sarah thought for a moment, absently stroking Fluffy's fur. Well, originally we kept them around to hunt pests, mice, rats, that kind of thing. Now, they're just nice to have around. They're soft, they purr, they do silly things that make us laugh. Sometimes they're aloof, sometimes they're cuddly. They've got personalities, you know? The aliens exchange bewildered looks. The concept of keeping a potentially dangerous creature around simply because it was nice was utterly foreign to them. Besides, Sarah added with a grin, haven't you ever wanted to say you've tamed a fearsome beast? Makes you feel pretty badass. This at least seemed to resonate with some of the students. A few puffed up with pride, clearly imagining themselves as mighty predatormers. Johnson. A new voice cut through the chatter. Professor Zixnax had finally descended from his hover podium and was approaching the group cautiously. I must admit, your handling of the situation was impressive. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Why, Professor, was that almost a compliment? The alien's eye stalks twitched in what might have been embarrassment. Yes, well, while your methods were unorthodox, to say the least, I cannot argue with the results. The students seem to have learned a great deal. Always happy to help broaden some horizons, Sarah said, her tone softening a bit. Though maybe next time, give me a heads up before you bring live animals to class. I could have brought treats. Fluffy here would kill for some catnip. The professor's color shifted to a pale green, alarm, if Sarah remembered her alien biology correctly. Kill. But you said. Sarah laughed. Figure of speech, Prof. Remind me to give you a crash course in human idioms sometime. Could save you a heart attack. Or, whatever the equivalent is for your species. Professor Zixnax nodded slowly. I see. Yes, perhaps that would be beneficial. Your species' use of language is quite colorful. Oh, you have no idea, Sarah grinned. Now, what do you say we find Fluffy here a more comfortable place to hang out? Pretty sure the lab container isn't up to human standards of pet care. The professor agreed, and soon the class was trooping down to the biology department's vivarium. Sarah led the way, still cradling Fluffy, who had fallen asleep in her arms. As they walked, Sarah found herself bombarded with more questions from her classmates. Is it true that Earth felines can survive falls from great heights? Asked T-Zix, a insectoid, being with a particular interest in physics. Yep, Sarah nodded. They've got this crazy ability to right themselves in midair. Plus, their bodies are basically built to absorb impact. There's stories of cats falling from skyscrapers and walking away with barely a scratch. I shan't. This elicited a chorus of impressed clicks and whistles from the aliens. And they possess some form of mind control, do they not? This from Vexora, a telepathic species that was always suspicious of other beings' mental capabilities. Sarah almost tripped over her own feet. Wait, what? Mind control? Where'd you hear that? Vexora's antennae twitched nervously. Is it not true? We had heard that felines can bend humans to their will, forcing them to provide food and shelter. For a moment, Sarah just stared. Then she burst out laughing, startling Fluffy awake. Oh man, that's amazing. No, Vexora, cats don't have mind control. They're just really good at looking cute and pitiful when they want something. And yeah, it works on us more often than we'd like to admit. I do not understand, Vexora said, clearly confused. If they do not control your mind, why do you give in to their demands? Sarah shrugged, which was quite a feat while holding a cat. Because they're adorable and we're suckers. Look at this face. She held Fluffy up, and the cat blinked sleepily at the assembled aliens. You try saying no to that. The aliens leaned in, studying Fluffy's face intently. A few of them made noises that Sarah interpreted as awe, though it was hard to tell with some species. Fascinating, Professor Zixnax murmured, his scientific curiosity apparently overcoming his fear. The creature does seem to possess some quality that engenders a nurturing response, even in species not closely related to it. It's called being cute, Prof, Sarah said. Works across the galaxy, apparently. As they entered the vivarium, Sarah looked around critically. Okay, we're going to need to make some adjustments here. Fluffy's going to need a litter box, some toys, a scratching post, oh, and somewhere high up to perch. Cats love to be up high. The professor blinked all four of his eyes. Mims, Johnson, this is a scientific research facility, not a pet store. Sarah finished for him. Yeah, I get that. But if you're going to keep Fluffy here for study, you need to make sure he's comfortable. Happy cat, better research results. Trust me on this. To her surprise, the professor didn't argue. Instead, he turned to the class. Well, you heard Ms. Johnson. It seems we have a new project, creating a suitable habitat for our guest. The next few hours were a flurry of activity as the class worked together to create a cat paradise in the corner of the virium. The virium. Sarah directed operations like a seasoned general, delegating tasks and offering guidance. No, Grix, the litter box doesn't go next to the food bowl. Would you want your toilet next to your dining table? Blixtorp, buddy, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but maybe let someone with, solid arms handle the scratching post assembly. T-Zix, that's not actually, what. That's a pretty awesome cat toy you've engineered there. Fluffy's going to love it. Throughout it all, Fluffy supervised from Sarah's arms, occasionally offering a meow of approval or a disdainful flick of the tail. As the makeshift cat habitat neared completion, Sarah noticed Professor Zixnax hovering nearby, his eye stalks twitching with what she'd come to recognize as curiosity. Something on your mind, Prof? She asked. The alien scientist startled slightly. Ah, Ms. Johnson, I was merely observing. Your expertise in this area is quite remarkable. Sarah shrugged. It's not expertise really, just experience. When you grow up with cats, you learn this stuff by osmosis. Osmosis. The professor's color shifted to a confused yellow. I was not aware that felines had the ability to transfer knowledge through semi-permeable membranes. Sarah bit back a laugh. No, it's just an expression. It means you pick things up without really trying, just by being around them. I see, Professor Zixnax said, though his tone suggested he didn't, really. Humans do seem to have a remarkable affinity for these creatures. I must admit, I find it puzzling. And Sarah considered this for a moment, absently scratching Fluffy behind the ears. I guess it would seem weird from an outside perspective. But humans have a long history of bonding with other species. Dogs, horses, cats, even some animals you'd think would be way too dangerous. The professor's eye stalks perked up with interest. Oh, such as? Well, there are people who keep big cats as pets, lions, tigers, that sort of thing. It's not really a good idea, mind you, but it happens. Then you've got folks who work with elephants or train bears for movies. Heck, there's a guy back on Earth who swims with great white sharks for fun. The alien scientist looked like he was about to faint. But why? Surely the risk outweighs any potential benefit. Sarah shrugged again. For some humans, that's kind of the point. The risk, the challenge of it. Taming the untamable, But for most of us, it's simpler than that. We just like animals. They're interesting, they're often cute, and there's something really special about forming a bond with a creature that's so different from you. Professor Zixnax was quiet for a long moment, his eye stalks swiveling between Sarah, Fluffy, and the rest of the class, who were putting the finishing touches on the cat habitat. I believe, he said slowly, that I may have underestimated your species, Ms. Johnson's. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Oh, how so? When you first arrived at our institution, many of us were concerned. Your planet's classification as a death world carries certain connotations. We expected aggression, perhaps even violence. Yeah, I picked up on that, Sarah said dryly. Hence the hazmat teams that met me at the spaceport. The professor had the grace to look embarrassed, his color shifting to a mottled purple. Yes, well, in light of recent events, I'm beginning to think we may have misunderstood what it means to come from a death world. Sarah nodded encouragingly. Go on. Your ability to handle and even bond with creatures that the rest of us find terrifying, it's not because you're more aggressive or violent. It's because you're more adaptable, more willing to understand and connect with other species, even potentially dangerous ones. Ah, Sarah said, genuinely impressed. That's actually a pretty insightful observation, Prof. And the alien preened a bit at the compliment, his color brightening. Yes, well, I am a scientist. Observation is my stock and trade. Don't suppose this means you'll be canceling the weekly human containment drills, though? Sarah asked with a smirk. The professor's color shifted again, this time to what Sarah had come to recognize as his flustered hue. Those drills are merely a precautionary measure, I assure you. Standard protocol for any potentially hazardous, that is to say, for any new species on campus. Sarah laughed. Relax, Prof. I'm just teasing. Though I gotta say, watching the entire biology department try to wrangle me into a containment unit every Friday is pretty hilarious. Especially since half of them are species I could basically bench press. Before the professor could respond, there was a commotion from the newly constructed cat habitat. They turned to see Fluffy, finally released from Sarah's arms, exploring his new domain. The class watched in awe as the cat sniffed every corner, batted at the toys T-Zix had constructed, and finally settled into a plush bed the Vaxora had insisted on replicating based on human comfort standards. Well, would you look at that, Sarah said softly. I think he likes it. As if on cue, Fluffy began to purr, the sound reverberating through the vivarium. Several of the alien students jumped back in alarm. It's vibrating. Blixtorp exclaimed, his gelatinous form quivering with excitement. Is it preparing to attack? Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Now that's purring. It means he's happy. Fascinating, Professor Zix murmured, edging closer to the habitat. And this, purring, it's a common behavior in Earth felines. Sarah nodded. Yup, it's one of the reasons humans find them so soothing to be around. There's actually some evidence that the frequency of a cat's purr can have healing properties for humans. This set off a new round of excited chatter among the students. Sarah could practically see the gears turning in the professor's head, no doubt already planning new research projects. You know, Sarah said, a mischievous glint in her eye, if you really want to understand Earth felines, there's no substitute for Hansen experience. The professor's eye stalks swiveled towards her suspiciously. What exactly are you suggesting, Ms. Johnson? Sarah grinned. I'm saying, Prof, that it's time for you to make a new friend. Before the alien scientist could protest, Sarah had gently but firmly guided him to the entrance of the habitat. Fluffy, spotting a new potential source of attention, trotted over. Miss Johnson, I really don't think this is nice. The professor's objection cut off in a startled squeak as Fluffy rubbed against his tentacles, purring even louder. See? Sarah said encouragingly. He likes you. Go on, give him a little scratch behind the ears, carefully. Oh, with a trembling tentacle, Professor Zix reached out and gently stroked Fluffy's head. The cat leaned into the touch, purring contentedly. Oh my, the professor breathed, his color shifting to a warm, pleased orange. That's quite remarkable. The rest of the class watched in amazement as their formerly terrified professor bonded with the creature he'd been so afraid of just hours before. Slowly, one by one, they began to approach the habitat, each taking a turn to interact with Fluffy under Seger's guidance. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah found herself sitting on the floor of the vivarium, surrounded by her alien classmates, all of whom were peppering her with questions about Earth animals, human-animal bonds, and life on a death one. So if cats are considered easy pets, Grix asked, his methane breather hissing with excitement, what kind of creatures do humans keep that are considered challenging? Sarah thought for a moment. Well, there's always exotic reptiles, snakes, large lizards, that sort of thing. They need very specific environments and diets. Oh, and some people keep birds of prey, like falcons or eagles. That's a whole skill set in itself. And humans enjoy this challenge. T-Zix clicked, his compound eyes gleaming with curiosity. Some do, yes, Sarah nodded. For a lot of humans, the harder something is to do, the more satisfying it is when you succeed. Plus, there's just something cool about having a bond with an animal that most people wouldn't dare to approach. This set off another round of excited chatter among the aliens. Sarah couldn't help but smile. Who would have thought that a simple house cat would be the key to bridging the gap between her and her exobiology classmates? As the day drew to a close, Professor Zix called for the class's attention. Sarah was surprised to see that he was still in the cat habitat, Fluffy curled up contentedly beside him. Students, he began, his voice carrying a new note of enthusiasm. Today's unconventional lesson has opened my eyes to new possibilities in our field of study. Ms. Johnson's expertise has shown us that there is much to learn about interspecies relationships, particularly when it comes to creatures from death worlds like Earth. Sarah felt a warmth in her chest at the professor's words. It was nice to be seen as more than just a walking biohazard for once. And therefore the professor continued, I am proposing a new course of study, Practical Xenobiology, Earth Edition. Miss Johnson, would you be willing to assist in designing and teaching this course? Sarah blinked in surprise. Me? Teach? I mean, I'm just a student myself, Prof. Perhaps, Professor Nax agreed, but you possess practical knowledge that none of our current faculty can match. Your insights today have been invaluable. Sarah looked around at her classmates, seeing eager nods and encouraging gestures, or the alien equivalents thereof. She thought about all the misconceptions she'd encountered since arriving on campus, all the fear and misunderstanding about her home planet and its inhabitants. You know what? She said finally, a grin spreading across her face. I'm in. Let's teach these folks what Earth is really all about. The class erupted in cheers and various alien sounds of approval. Even Fluffy joined in, mewing loudly as if voicing his own excitement. As Sarah began discussing potential lesson plans with the professor and her enthusiastic classmates, she couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Like she'd come to this alien university to learn about life on other worlds, and here she was, about to teach an entire course on life from her own planet, all because of one ordinary house cat named Fluffy. Well, little guy, she said, reaching down to scratch Fluffy's chin, looks like you and I are going to revolutionize xenobiology education. Not bad for a day's work, ha. Fluffy purred in response, and Sarah could have sworn he looked smug. Then again, he was a cat. Looking smug was kind of their default state. As the excited chatter of her classmates washed over her, Sarah felt a sense of anticipation building. Sure, she missed Earth sometimes, but right now, there was nowhere else in the galaxy she'd rather be. After all, she had a class to prepare for. And something told her that Xenobiology 101, Intro to Earth's Apex Predators, was going to be the talk of the campus. Let the other human exchange students stick to boring old physics and chemistry. Sarah Johnson was about to make xenobiology the hottest course in the universe, and it all started with a cat. As the excitement of the impromptu lesson died down and the other students filed out of the vivarium, chattering animatedly about the day's events, Sarah found herself alone with Professor Nax and Fluffy. The cat had made himself comfortable on a cushion in his new habitat, looking for all the world like he owned the place. So, Sarah said, breaking the comfortable silence, I guess we should probably talk about the logistics of this new course, huh? Professor Nax's eye stalks bobbed in agreement. Indeed, Ms. Johnson. There is much to consider. Curriculum design, safety protocols, resource allocation. Yeah, about that, Sarah interrupted, a thought suddenly occurring to her. We're going to need more animals, aren't we? I mean, Fluffy's great and all, but he's just one species. If we're going to give a comprehensive overview of Earth's fauna, we'll need a bit more variety. The professor's color shifted to a thoughtful blue. You raise an excellent point. Our xenobiology department does have connections with various intergalactic zoos and conservation programs. Perhaps we could arrange some loans. Sarah winced. Maybe we should start a bit smaller. I'm not sure the campus is ready for a lion or an elephant just yet. Quite right, the professor agreed, looking slightly relieved. What would you suggest? Sarah thought for a moment. Well, we could start with some other common Earth pets. Dogs, obviously, they're probably even more important than cats when it comes to human-animal bonds. Maybe some small reptiles like bearded dragons or geckos. Oh, and definitely some rodents, hamsters, gerbils, that kind of thing. As she spoke, Sarah could see the professor's eye stalks twitching with increasing alarm. Miss Johnson, he said carefully, are you suggesting we fill our laboratory with a menagerie of Earth's most dangerous wildlife? Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Prof, trust me, none of the animals I just listed are dangerous. Well, unless you're a cricket, I guess. Bearded dragons love their crickets. The professor's color cycled through several shades of confusion. But they're from Earth. Surely they must be lethal in some way. Nope, Sarah said, popping the P for emphasis. Most animals on Earth are pretty harmless. especially the ones we keep as pets. Heck, humans are probably more dangerous than 90% of Earth's species. This revelation seemed to stun the professor into silence. Sarah could almost see the gears turning in his alien brain, reevaluating everything he thought he knew about Earth and its inhabitants. "Tell you what," Sarah said, taking pity on the overwhelmed alien, "why don't I put together a proposal? I'll list out some species I think would be good for the course along with care requirements, safety considerations, and potential learning outcomes. That way, you and the department can review it and we can figure out what's feasible." Professor Zixnax's eye stalks perked up. "Yes, excellent idea, Ms. Johnson. Very, very professional approach." Sarah grinned. "Hey, I may be the crazy Deathworlder who cuddles with predators, but I do know how to work within a system. How do you think I got into this exchange program in the first place?" The professor's color shifted to what Sarah had come to recognize as his impressed hue. "Indeed, I look forward to seeing your proposal." "And Ms. Johnson?" "Yeah, Prof. And for Yoff, thank you for today's lesson and for broadening our perspectives." Sarah felt a warm glow of pride. "Happy to help, Prof. It's kind of why I came here, you know? To learn about other species, sure, but also to help others understand humans better." As if on cue, Fluffy chose that moment to wake up from his nap. He stretched luxuriously, then sauntered over to the edge of his enclosure, mewing demandingly. "And what do you want, Your Highness?" Sarah asked, reaching out to scratch his chin. The cat purred, then looked pointedly at Professor Zixnax. "I think," Sarah said with a smirk, "Fluffy here is wondering if his new friend is going to pet him again." The professor startled. "Friend? Surely you don't mean?" "Oh, I definitely do," Sarah laughed. "Congrats, Prof. You've been adopted by a cat. I might want to stock up on lint rollers. I have a feeling you're going to be covered in orange fur pretty often from now on." With obvious trepidation but also a hint of excitement, Professor Zixnax extended a tentacle towards Fluffy. The cat immediately began rubbing against it, purring even louder than before. "Remarkable," the professor murmured. "Truly remarkable." As Sarah watched the unlikely pair bonding, an idea began to form in her mind. "Hey, Prof," she said slowly, "what would you say to making Fluffy here the official mascot of our new course?" The professor considered this for a moment, his free tentacles waving thoughtfully, a living embodiment of the course's objectives, serving as both subject and teaching aid. "Yes, I believe that could work quite well." "Great," Sarah beamed. "I'll add it to the proposal. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some work to do. Gotta start planning how to introduce the galaxy to the wonders of Earth's animal kingdom." As she gathered her things and headed for the door, Sarah paused for one last look back. Professor Zixnax was still petting Fluffy, his eye stalks fixed on the cat with a mixture of scientific curiosity and something that looked suspiciously like affection. "You know," Sarah called out, unable to resist one last quip, "there's an old Earth saying dogs have owners, cats have staff. Looks like you just got hired, Prof." The confused look on the professor's face, combined with Fluffy's smug expression, sent Sarah into a fit of giggles as she left the vivarium. Oh yeah, this course was going to be fun. Over the next few weeks, Sarah threw herself into preparation for the new course. Her dorm room became a chaotic mess of data pads, holographic displays, and hastily scribbled notes, much to the alarm of her Zygoblaxian roommate, who was convinced the scattered papers were some form of deadly Earth spore. She spent hours in the university's xenobiology archives, comparing Earth ecosystems to those of other planets. She pored over the curriculum of a dozen different xenobiology courses, trying to figure out how to structure her own. She even started a video call study group with some of her former classmates back on Earth, picking their brains for interesting animal facts and behaviors that might surprise her alien students. But Sarah's favorite part of the preparation was her daily visits to Fluffy. The cat had become something of a celebrity on campus, with students from all departments finding excuses to stop by the vivarium for a peek at the famous Earth predator. Much to Sarah's amusement, Professor Zixnax had taken to spending his lunch breaks with Fluffy, alternating between taking meticulous notes on the cat's behavior and engaging in what could only be described as baby talk, though the universal translator struggled mightily with that particular form of communication. It was during one of these visits that Sarah had a breakthrough. She'd been watching Fluffy chase a laser pointer, operated by a thoroughly entertained Blixtorp, when it hit her The key to teaching aliens about Earth animals wasn't to focus on their physical characteristics or biological functions. It was to show how they interacted with their environment and with humans. Excited by this revelation, Sarah burst into Professor Zixnax's office the next day, her arms full of notes and holographic projectors. "Prof," she exclaimed, barely noticing as she sent a stack of alien petri dishes clattering to the floor. "I figured it out." And the professor, who had been in the middle of examining some sort of pulsating fungus, jumped at her entrance. "It's Johnson. What have you, that is? What exactly have you figured out?" Sarah began setting up her holographic projectors, her words tumbling out in a rush of excitement. "The course structure. See, we've been thinking about it all wrong. We can't just present Earth animals as isolated specimens to be studied. We need to show them in context." A series of images sprang to life around the office. A dog helping a blind person navigate a busy street, a trained monkey assisting a paralyzed individual, a therapy horse working with autistic children. "Earth animals aren't just creatures that happen to share our planet," Sarah explained, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "They're our partners, our helpers, sometimes even our healers. That's what makes Earth unique, not that our animals are particularly deadly, but that we've formed these incredible bonds with them." Professor Zixnax's eye stalk swiveled rapidly, taking in the various images. "Fascinating," he murmured. "And you believe this approach will be more effective in teaching xenobiology?" "Absolutely." Sarah nodded vigorously. "Think about it, we've already seen how interested everyone is in Fluffy, not just as a biological specimen, but as a living, interactive being. If we structure the course around the ways humans and animals work together, live together, help each other, I think it'll give a much clearer picture of what Earth is really like." The professor was quiet for a long moment, his color shifting through various shades as he considered Sarah's proposal. Finally, he spoke. "Miss Johnson, I believe you may have stumbled upon something quite revolutionary here. A xenobiology course that focuses not just on the biology of alien species, but on their cultural and social significance. Yes, I think this could work very well indeed." Sarah let out a whoop of joy, then quickly composed herself. Thank you, Professor. I'm glad you see the potential in this approach." "Indeed," Professor Zixnax said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Though I must ask, how do you propose to provide practical demonstrations for all these human-animal interactions? Surely we can't bring an entire Earth farm to our campus." Sarah grinned. "Well, that's the best part. We're going to use holograms, video feeds," and she paused for dramatic effect. "Virtual reality." And the professor's eye stalk stood straight up in surprise. "Virtual reality. But our xenobiology department doesn't have access to such technology." "No," Sarah agreed, "but the computer science department does. And as it happens, I've made some friends over there who are very interested in collaborating on this project. Something about the challenge of simulating Earth's deadly fauna in a safe, controlled environment." She conveniently left out the part where she'd bribed the computer science students with promises of authentic Earth snacks from her personal stash. Apparently, Doritos were considered an exotic delicacy in this part of the galaxy. "Miss Johnson," Professor Zixnax said slowly, "I'm beginning to think we may have underestimated you rather severely when you first arrived on our campus." Sarah shrugged, trying to look modest but unable to keep the grin off her face. "What can I say, Prof? Humans are full of surprises. Now want to help me figure out how to fit a virtual reality elephant into your office." As she launched into an explanation of her plans for a VR safari experience, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. She'd come to this alien university hoping to learn about life on other worlds, and she was certainly doing that. But she was also teaching, bridging gaps, breaking down exceptions. One fluffy orange cat had opened the door. Now, armed with holograms, virtual reality, and an endless supply of animal facts, Sarah was ready to show the galaxy what Earth and humanity was really all about. Somewhere in the vivarium, Fluffy purred contentedly, blissfully unaware of his role as an intergalactic ambassador. But then again, that's cats for you, changing the universe one nap at a time.